In this movie, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson portrays a cunning criminal. He works as a driver in robberies alongside his brother. After one of the crimes, they are discovered, and their ill-gotten gains are targeted by their criminal colleagues. When the main character reveals the whereabouts of the hidden money, his brother has his throat slit, while The Rock himself takes a bullet to the head but survives and is sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, the thirst for vengeance for this time served doesn't dissipate, so the hero embarks on a long and arduous journey to find and punish everyone involved in his brother's death. A tattooed giant paces his cell, eagerly awaiting release. His photograph with an as-yet unknown young man adorns the wall. Eventually, the prisoner is let out, introduced to us merely as a driver. A correctional officer offers the ex-convict some last advice and a business card for any tough situations outside. However, the man is only interested in finding the exit. Barely beyond the prison walls, he discards the business card, deciding it's time to stretch his legs. Following a lengthy journey down the highway, amid a sprawl of auto parts, our hero discovers his sleek muscle car, a Chevrolet Chevelle. The keys, placed on the front wheel, await him, so he quickly unveils the car, starts it up without issue, and sets off in pursuit of his first target. All the necessary information is strategically hidden in the glove compartment. Beneath the seat, he also finds a revolver. Road safety isn't on the prison curriculum, so our protagonist parks and, ignoring the vehicles whizzing by on the highway, walks straight through the traffic to an office, despite the dismay of drivers. Inside, he doesn't bother with pleasantries and immediately begins searching for a particular employee. Before the office clerk can grasp the situation, he's met with a bullet to the forehead. Afterwards, the driver makes his exit but notices he's been caught on a surveillance camera. The narrative then shifts to a roadside motel, where a man in the bathroom tries to buy illegal drugs from a dealer. He offers a handful of crumpled change, but the dealer is dissatisfied with the payment. Following a brief exchange, the buyer manages to convince his acquaintance to go through with the deal. He heads back to his car with the purchase. The scene changes to the office, where the main character committed murder. It's now teeming with police, among whom is the drug enthusiast from the motel. The presence of this fan of illegal substances is unwelcome, especially for a female detective among the officers. The character is introduced to us simply as a cop. It turns out he's been assigned the case of the clerk's murder, with just a couple of weeks left until his retirement. A female colleague disdainfully extinguishes a cigarette in her coffee mug, reminding me that smoking is not allowed here. They are assigned as partners. The next episode begins in a small office, where the driver arrives. Inside, two individuals watch a television report about the recent murder of the clerk. When The Rock enters, the man sitting at the table says he's been a very bad boy and demands money for the car he left the hero. The latter pays up and asks his associate for the names of the other accomplices involved in his brother's death. The informant indicates that the price for such information has gone up over the 10 years the hero was incarcerated. This seems to happen when The Rock reveals his money rolled up in a tube. The hero is displeased with this inflation and refuses to meet the new price. In response, the informant tries to sic his bodyguard on him, a champion in no-holds-barred fighting. However, when the bodyguard sees a tattoo on the driver's arm, his enthusiasm evaporates. In a panic, he calls the hero a ghost and flees. Left alone, the informant becomes more cooperative and even provides The Rock with a small compensation. Meanwhile, back at the police station, the cops and his new partner named Cesaro are watching the surveillance footage from the office. They notice that the killer and the clerk were acquainted. At the end of the conversation, the cop receives a call from the mother of his child, asking him to take their kid to baseball practice before abruptly hanging up. While the law enforcement officers continue their investigation, the main character heads towards his next target. A new hero of the story is introduced to us, named Killer. This guy lives in a richly furnished house with a beautiful partner. He pays a lot of attention to maintaining his physical condition. On Killer's walls are hung his photographs, including magazine covers featuring his face, all testifying to his success in his field. It's also revealed that Killer had leg problems in his childhood. He diligently practices yoga, which borders on breakdancing. After his workout, he greets his lady and talks with her in the yard. Killer claims he's outgrown yoga and now needs something more extreme. For an assassin, he seems too jovial, yet he receives an order for a new target over the phone. The photo sent by the client is of The Rock. Without any further questions, and with his girlfriend's assistance, Killer prepares, grabs his weapon, and leaves in one of his sports cars. In the last moment before departure, Killer rushes out to his beloved and gives her a farewell kiss. Then, the young man talks to his psychologist. He mentions starting to tire of his assignments, but hides his true profession, pretending to be a surgeon who removes tumors. The doctor is skeptical but continues the session over the phone. Concurrently, the guy surveils a suspicious old man. Back at the police station, Detective Cesaro studies a photo of the driver's tattoo. Sergeant Mallory apologizes to the lady for having to work with a cop, but asks her not to hinder his assistance in the investigation. After speaking with her superiors, Cesara shows the approaching cop a photo of the killer identified through surveillance cameras and the testimony of the prison warden. The cop smirks at the sight of the rock, revealing that he earned his keep in prison through smuggling. Cesara tells the cop that the hero was arrested 10 years ago for a bank robbery in which he served as the driver. Next, we're shown the robbery itself and how the main character's gang skillfully evades pursuit thanks to his exceptional driving skills. Particularly, driving in reverse seems to give them an edge, a tactic the police seem unprepared for. While Cesara continues to detail the case to the cop, we're taken to the house of the grandfather killer is watching. The old man returns to his apartment not alone, but with a young woman who helps him with groceries. He insistently persuades the guest to drink something. Suddenly, a car approaches the house where all this is happening. Killer finishes his phone conversation with the psychologist and prepares his weapon. He mentions he's planning to propose to his partner. Also, after getting out of the car, he informs his doctor that he has stopped taking his medication. The doctor bids him farewell with a warning. Meanwhile, the main character steps out of his car and moves towards the old man's residence. Killer follows him and enters the door behind him. Meanwhile, the old man spikes something for his caretaker and waits for her to pass out. As a flashback, we're shown footage being watched by the cop and Cesara. It captures amateur footage of the driver and his brother being held hostage by other gangsters. The brother begs the main character not to reveal where the money is, or they'll be killed. According to the kidnappers, such a part has already befallen other members of their gang. The criminals say that the only chance to survive is to reveal where the loot is hidden. The hero fears for his brother and doesn't know what to do. He wants to disclose the location of the stash. The captors pressure the brothers, fire shots nearby, and threaten them. Eventually, the driver confesses to the whereabouts of the money, and his brother's throat is immediately slit. Some of the gang members don't understand why the man was killed, but most of them don't care. The whole act is filmed by the old man under surveillance by Killer. The film returns from the flashback to the present, where the driver smashes the door of the old pervert into pieces and foils his plans. The elderly gangster tries to justify himself by saying that he was forced to kill the hero's brother by a certain boss, and receives 2 bullets. Frightened, The Rock leaves the nurse in the apartment and runs out into the hallway himself. There, he's already awaited by Killer. The presence of a little girl rushing into the corridor interferes with quietly carrying out the mission, but the hero tosses her into the adjacent room and initiates a shootout. He doesn't shoot at the killer, but forces him to hide in a corner. This trick buys the main character time to escape. Killer tries to pursue his target but fails. From the window of the old man's apartment, he only sees smoke from the swiftly departing Chevrolet. Meanwhile, we're shown the conclusion of the flashbacks, where the protagonist receives a bullet in the back of his head from an unknown assailant but vows to seek vengeance on everyone. The bullet exits through, and unexpectedly, in the hospital, the main character rises from the dead. His skull is held together by a metal plate. The cop arrives at the mother of his child's place, and she accuses him of being late. He tries to justify himself by saying he got a serious case, but the woman isn't interested. She threatens to strip the cop of his parental rights and orders him to hurry to the game. On the way, the cop's son Tommy admits he doesn't really love baseball. He's rarely let off the bench. The cop promises to talk to the boy's coach, but then receives a call from Cesara asking him to come to the crime scene. Hearing this, Tommy becomes disappointed, but his dad pretends he's sorted everything out and will stay at the match instead of working. He tries to win his son's favor. Eventually, the cop arrives at the crime scene half an hour late and receives a sharp comment from Cesara. The slain old man turns out to be a lover of filming dirty videos, and the police also realize he captured the murder of the driver's brother. Furthermore, they're aware of the shootout with Killer, but the identity of the second shooter remains unknown. Sitting in his room, Killer tells his future fiancée about how the target turned out not to be so simple. He praises the driver for acting calmly and fearlessly. Then he decides that proposing over the phone is a great idea and does just that. His chosen one, Lily, smiles and is about to say yes. The next day at the station, Cesara notices a strange tattoo on the cop's arm. It turns out that before transferring, the officer served in the Los Angeles Homicide Division, which became notorious for dirty dealings and unworthy behavior. There the cop met his beloved ex-wife Marina. She was his informant. It turns out he had undergone rehabilitation for addiction, but he tries to brush off his partner's strange looks with a phrase about those being bygone days. The cop lies, saying he quit when his son was born. The driver's next target becomes a woman. He observes her from the car window as she sees her son off from home. The protagonist decides to pay her a visit. He takes a pistol and enters the premises. Inside, the woman he's looking for is feeding a baby. During the conversation, and after a brisk slap, we learn that the person in the frame is not his target but but his ex-wife. It turns out the man had forbidden from visiting him in prison for 10 years, and now thinks that the boy he saw from the car window is his son. But it's not. The woman has already started a new life, and the main character's child did not survive to birth. His mother had an abortion. Crushed by the news, The Rock leaves to continue his crusade. Following him, his former lover tells him that she knows everything and wishes him luck. While the main character's drama unfolds, Killer decides to have a grand wedding with his fiancée Lily. The entrance features races in cool cars, a beautiful ceremony, and, of course, the most romantic part of the wedding shooting at Targets. The guy suggests starting a new life with his wife on a clean slate in Pasadena and promises to quit his job as a bounty hunter. Meanwhile, the cop arrives at Marina's and asks to come inside. He's surprised that his ex-wife is closely following his case on TV. The cop suggests starting over, but the woman refuses, saying she has a different life now. She's studying for a new profession and wants to make her life with her son better. Trying to persuade his chosen one, the man even gives her his stash of drugs and promises to check into rehab, but only after the job is done. He asks for at least one day to spend with his ex-wife and son. She hesitates but doesn't refuse. Meanwhile, to the sound of the radio, the main character drives through the night to his new target. He stops in front of a strip club, tracks down the right person, and enters. His target turns out to be a bouncer. The protagonist confronts him in the restroom. It's the man who slit his brother's throat. After a brief conversation, the killer asks the elderly janitor, Joe, to leave the room and pretend he saw nothing, regardless of who wins the fight. The old man follows the guy's advice. The Rock locks the door, and the knife fight begins. The brother's killer loses the duel and asks for forgiveness from the driver. He also asks the protagonist to call his son and convey his apologies. The Rock leaves the barely breathing target on the floor and fulfills the dying man's last request in the car.
Your father's sorry.
Meanwhile, Killer sits on the couch, looking at photos from his life. When he gets to his childhood and his wounded legs, his expression changes, and he starts feeling the scars. Afterward, he starts vigorously cleaning his weapon. Lily finds him in this state. She hopes her husband will abandon his plan, but he decides to finish the job and quit the dangerous profession afterward. Lily tries to persuade him, but he remains steadfast and continues cleaning the gun. The cop wakes up in bed with his son. The boy says he doesn't like baseball. The father responds that practice makes perfect and suggests playing, noting that he himself isn't a good baseball player. He finds Marina in the bathroom in a drugged state. His girlfriend admits she's afraid of ending up in the hell they create for themselves in life, causing each other pain and suffering. After this, the cop throws away the remaining substance in the trash and falls asleep with Marina. The fourth day of the narrative begins with both the cop and the killer leaving their homes in the morning, looking puzzled and concerned. Cop gets a call from Cesaro, who informs him that she found a lead. Both victims of the driver were police informants and were involved in the killing of his brother. She asks the cop to verify the information, but he responds that he must talk to the victim of the pawn shop from Henderson, the same security guard the main character assaulted in the strip club. Ignoring Cesaro's request, the cop drives to the intensive care unit for interrogation. The main character, hearing on the radio that the killer of his brother survived the injuries from the previous day and is in the clinic, turns the car around 180 degrees and rushes at full speed towards the hospital. The killer's client also informs him about the surviving victim and assumes that the Rock will go after him. The cop arrives at the clinic first. However, the main character doesn't keep himself waiting. In his usual manner, he forcefully enters the operating room, where doctors fight for the life of his target, and shoots the guy in the forehead. Hearing the gunshots from the neighboring room, the cop rushes out. He pursues the main character to the basement and engages in a shootout with him. At one moment, the driver catches his opponent off guard and puts him on his knees. But as soon as he closes his eyes, the hero disappears. The driver gets into his muscle car and drives away. On the way, he receives a call from the son of the killer of his brother. The boy threatens to avenge his father. The main character tells him to do what he must but realizes the consequences of his actions. At that moment, the killer catches up with him from behind. The risky chase doesn't last long. The driver gets shot in the neck, and he shoots the tire of his opponent and disappears into the night. Frustrated, the killer receives a call from the clients, who inform him that they are canceling the contract. However, the guy doesn't want to give up so easily and, consequently, doesn't want to abandon his mission either. The driver arrives home at the father of his brother, suspecting that he might have betrayed everyone after the robbery, but only the mother of the main character is there, and her fiancé passed away 3 or 4 years ago. The woman stitches up her son's wound and says that her husband loved Gary, the hero's brother, so he couldn't have done anything like that to him. The driver reveals that the bank robbery was a way to repay Gary's debts, and he volunteered to help because he couldn't abandon a close friend in trouble. After collecting his brother's ashes, he heads to meet the next target, endlessly pondering wondering on the way who could have betrayed their gang. At the police station, the cop tells his partner about encountering the driver in the hospital and miraculously surviving. Everyone around congratulates him for almost catching the criminal. Cesaro forgives him, drops the abandoned receiver, and shows the cop a possible list of the Avengers' targets. All of them are informants, who served minimal sentences for serious crimes. The cop undertakes to check on accomplices whom the main character has not reached yet. Meanwhile, the driver confronts his last target from his list. It turns out to be a wandering preacher from a mobile temple tent, whose preaching he heard on the radio all along the way. Upon arrival, the main character waits for the sermon to end before speaking to the priest. The man tells the Avenger that he abandoned dirty deeds long ago and now tries to guide as many people as possible on the right path. During the hero's and his brother's capture, he didn't want them to be killed. Before the walk to the shore, the future victim's wife and child come to see him. The main character visibly freezes upon seeing them, but sticks to his plan. On the way, the men talk. It turns out the preacher is the father of 12 adopted children. He admits he should have just stood by for easy money in the Gary case. The preacher honestly confesses to his actions, but regrets them. He says he took his share and went to prison, where he turned to God. The main character hesitates for a long time, but then kneels his target and prepares to shoot. At the last moment, he shoots into the air, releases the victim to his family, and returns to the temple tent. There, the killer finds him and raises his gun. He doesn't rush to shoot, but seeks an honest duel and acknowledgement of his merits. The main character calmly sits and tells the killer that he hasn't done anything to him. He also points out the killer's insecurities. At that moment, the assassin takes the gun from the driver and aims at his head. Seeing a list lying next to the main character, the hitman notes that there should be one more person there, his client, but he doesn't mention the name. Meanwhile, the cop emerges from his car. He walks into the temple and slowly approaches the killer from behind, ordering the killer to drop his weapon. He agrees under threat of death. At the moment when he lowers his gun, a shot rings out. The cop shoots the driver in the back of the head. Thought he turned out to be the client and the one who tried to kill the main character the first time. The cop tells the killer that he decided to get involved in the case when he saw that the hitman couldn't kill his target in the old man's apartment. The interlocutor shows him the list and says that the driver didn't even know about the existence of the client. The cop says he understood it when the main character didn't shoot him in the basement of the clinic. It turns out that Gary's girlfriend was a detective's informant. She betrayed the gang. The rest of the cop's informants helped to rob the driver and his accomplices. After this thrilling story, the killer leaves the tent, but the cop catches up with him and tries to pay him for the job. It turns out that the young man charges only $1 for his services and considers contract killings his hobby. However, he refuses even this payment because technically the job was not completed. In the end, he says he's done with it. Cesaro goes to the crime scene and realizes on the way that all those involved were actually informants of one boss, the cop. She realizes that he might be involved in what's happening. She calls the station, where she learns that the cop volunteered to take the case, and then everything falls into place in her mind. The cop calls his girlfriend to say that the case is over. He's in good spirits, and he thinks everything will be fine. Life will start anew. But a gunshot to the back interrupts his flow of positive thoughts. The steel plate in the hero's head turns out to be stronger than the bullet fired into it. The killer returns to his wife. Cesaro arrives at the crime scene and finds the cop's body. She doesn't tell her colleagues about his past. At sunset, the driver scatters his brother's ashes over the reservoir and drives off into the horizon in his car, while the preacher lectures his congregation on forgiveness.